The ship moved slowly through the darkness of space. Inside, Commander Daniel Hartley stood near the main window and watched the lights of the Galactic Council station grow bigger. His heart was beating fast. This was the day humanity had waited for. This was the day they would finally meet the other species of the galaxy. The ship was called the Starlight Wanderer. It was not the biggest ship humans had ever built, but it was beautiful and strong. 50 crew members worked on board, and each one of them knew how important this mission was. They were not just travelers. They were the first humans to ever visit the Great Council Station, where all the alien species came together. Daniel turned away from the window and walked through the corridor toward the meeting room. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. He passed other crew members who nodded at him with nervous smiles. Everyone felt the same thing. Hope mixed with fear. In the meeting room, he found the rest of the diplomatic team preparing for arrival. There was Lieutenant Kevin Brooks, a young man with quick eyes and a talent for languages. There was Dr. Maria Santos, an older woman who had studied alien cultures for 30 years. And there was Ambassador Grace Monroe. Daniel stopped at the doorway and looked at her. Grace stood near the table, reading something on her datapad. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and a thin body that showed years of hard work. But what people always noticed first was her face. The left side of it was covered in burn scars. The skin there was rough and twisted, running from her temple down to her jaw. The scars pulled at the corner of her eye and the edge of her mouth. 15 years ago, Grace had been in a shuttle crash. The fire had taken her smooth skin, but not her life. And in those 15 years since, she had become the most respected diplomat in all of human space. She had stopped wars. She had saved millions of lives with her words alone. When Earth needed someone to represent humanity to the galaxy, they chose her. Grace looked up and saw Daniel standing there. She smiled, and the scars on her face moved with the expression. Some people found it hard to look at her when she smiled. Daniel did not. He had learned to see past the scars to the brilliant mind behind them. "Commander," she said, "are we close?" 10 minutes to docking, he replied. He walked into the room and stood beside her. "How do you feel?" Grace put down her datapad. "Nervous," she admitted, "but ready. We have prepared for this for years. Whatever happens today, we will face it together." Dr. Santos looked up from her own work. "I have been reading the cultural reports again. The Valorians prize physical beauty above almost everything else. The Githari believe that any flaw in the body shows a flaw in the soul. I am worried about how they will react to—" She stopped, looking uncomfortable. "To my face," Grace finished for her. Her voice was calm. "I know. The Council chose me knowing this would be a problem. They believe it is important." Lieutenant Brooks frowned. Why would they send someone the aliens might reject? "No offense, Ambassador, but it seems like a risk." Grace turned to face him. "Because if we send only our most beautiful, we are lying about who we are. Humans are not perfect. We have scars. We have flaws. If we cannot be accepted as we truly are, then what kind of acceptance would it be?" The young lieutenant had no answer for that. A voice came over the ship's communication system. "All personnel, prepare for docking." Repeat, "Prepare for docking." The team gathered their things and moved toward the airlock. Daniel walked beside Grace, matching her calm steps. Inside, his stomach was tight with worry. He had read the same reports as Dr. Santos. He knew what many of these alien species thought about physical imperfection. But Grace walked forward like she was going to a simple meeting, not into a room full of beings who might hate her on sight. The airlock connected with a soft thump. Lights turned green. The doors opened. The Galactic Council station was massive beyond anything Daniel had imagined. The corridor they stepped into was wide enough to fly a small ship through. The walls were made of something that looked like crystal, but felt warm to the touch. Lights floated in the air without any visible source. And waiting for them was a crowd of aliens. Daniel had seen pictures and videos during his training, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The Valorians were tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished glass in different colors. Blue, green, purple. They stood in small groups and watched the humans with large, dark eyes. The Cathari was shorter but wider, covered in fine golden fur, with 4 arms each and faces that seemed frozen in permanent judgment. There were other species too. The Marvothi, whose skin glowed with soft light that changed with their emotions. The Thran, who had no faces at all but communicated through movement and sound. Dozens of different forms of life, all gathered to see the new species that wanted to join their council. For a moment, there was silence. The aliens looked at the humans. The humans looked back. Then the Valorians saw Grace's face. Daniel watched it happen like a slow wave moving through water. First one Valorian noticed her scars and turned away. Then another. Then the ones beside them. Whispers started, soft at first, then louder. The translators in Daniel's ear picked up the words and converted them to English. What is wrong with it? Is that damage? Why would they bring damaged goods? Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. The Cathari were worse. They did not whisper. They openly stared with expressions of horror and disgust. One of them made a gesture that the translator could not convert, but that clearly meant something very rude. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. He wanted to shout at them, to defend Grace, to tell them they were wrong. But he held himself still. This was not his place to speak. This was Grace's moment. Grace had stopped walking. Daniel saw her body go very still, and he wondered if she would turn back. If she would give up before they even started. The hatred in the room was so thick he could almost taste it. Then Grace lifted her chin. She straightened her spine. And she walked forward. Her steps were steady and sure. She did not hurry. She did not slow down. She moved through the crowd of disgusted aliens like a queen walking through her own palace. Daniel followed her, and the rest of the team followed him. And together they crossed the great hall toward the raised platform where the council leaders waited. High Arbiter Zale was the tallest Valorian Daniel had ever seen. His skin was deep blue, like a midnight sky, and his dark eyes held no warmth at all. He looked down at the humans as they approached, and his gaze lingered on Grace's face with obvious contempt. "We were told," Zale said, his voice ringing through the hall, that humans would send their finest representatives, their best. "We expected to meet the peak of your species." He paused, letting his meaning sink in. "Why have you brought one so damaged before us?" The hall went quiet. Every alien waited for the answer. Every human held their breath. Grace Monroe looked up at the High Arbiter. She did not flinch from his disgust. She did not lower her eyes in shame. Instead, she smiled. "I am exactly what humanity chose to send," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. "I am their finest. I am their best. And I am ready to begin. Shall we?" The silence stretched on. Zale's face showed surprise, then confusion, then something that might have been the beginning of curiosity. Behind Grace, Daniel felt something shift in his chest. It was not just respect anymore. It was something deeper, something that would grow in the days to come. The first meeting of humanity and the galactic community had begun. The days that followed were harder than anything Daniel had expected. The Galactic Council did not simply welcome new species. There were tests and trials. There were ceremonies and feasts. There were long meetings where every detail of human culture was examined and judged. And through it all, the aliens made their feelings about Grace Monroe very clear. The first trial was a feast. All the council species gathered in a great dining hall to share food and drink. Each species brought dishes from their home world, and the humans had prepared carefully, bringing their best meals to show what Earth could offer. Daniel walked into the hall beside Grace, carrying a tray of food that Dr. Santos had spent hours preparing. The room was already full of aliens eating and talking. When they saw the humans enter, the talking stopped. Grace moved toward the nearest table, where a group of Cathari sat with their golden fur catching the light. She smiled politely and asked if she might join them. The Cathari looked at each other. Then, without saying a word, they stood up and walked away. They left their half-eaten food on the table and found seats on the other side of the room. Daniel felt his face grow hot with anger. But Grace simply sat down at the empty table and began to eat as if nothing had happened. "Ambassador," he said quietly, sitting beside her, "we should file a complaint." That was clearly an insult. Grace shook her head. "It was, but complaining will not change how they see me. Only time and patience will do that." She picked up a piece of bread and took a small bite. "Sit with me, Commander. Let them see that humans do not abandon each other." So Daniel sat, and Lieutenant Brooks sat, and Dr. Santos sat. And together, the human team ate their meal at the empty table, while aliens whispered about them from across the room. But not everyone stayed away. After some time, one of the Morvathi approached their table. Her name was Ambassador Lumineth, and she was old even by her species standards. Her skin was usually dark, but now it flickered with faint lights that Daniel did not understand. "May I sit?" Lumineth asked. Grace looked up in surprise. "Of course, please." Lumineth sat down slowly, her glowing skin still dim. "I do not approve of how you have been treated," she said. "But I also do not understand you. My people communicate through light. We show our emotions on our skin. When we are healthy, we are bright. When we are sick or injured, we are dark." She paused. "Your face shows damage. Among my people, you would be considered very ill. Why did your leaders send someone so clearly unwell?" Grace set down her food and looked at the Morvathi carefully. "I am not ill," she said. "I was injured many years ago. I survived. The marks on my face are scars from that survival. But why keep them?" Lumineth seemed truly confused. "Surely you could have them removed. Surely your medicine is advanced enough." It was a question Grace had been asked before. Daniel had heard her answer it twice already since their arrival. But this time, something in her voice was different. Softer, perhaps. More personal. "Among my people," Grace said, "we believe that our struggles make us who we are. When I look at my scars, I do not see ugliness. I see proof that I lived through something that should have killed me. I see strength. I see survival." She reached up and touched her scarred cheek. To remove them would be to erase a part of my history, a part of myself. Lumineth was quiet for a long moment. Her skin flickered with colors Daniel could not read. Then she stood up. "I do not understand," she said, "but I will think about your words." She walked away, leaving the humans alone again. But Daniel noticed that her lights were slightly brighter than before. The trials continued. There were tests of knowledge, where Dr. Santos answered hundreds of questions about human history and science. There were tests of skill, where Lieutenant Brooks demonstrated human technology and explained how it worked. There were tests of art, where the humans showed paintings and played music and told stories. Through it all, Grace was the one who spoke the most. She explained human customs with patience. She answered rude questions with calm honesty. She never lost her temper, even when the questions were designed to hurt her. "Why do humans keep their damaged members alive?" asked a Cathari judge during one session. "Would it not be kinder to end their suffering?" We do not see scars as damage, Grace replied. We see them as evidence of life fully lived. Every mark on a human body tells a story. We treasure those stories. Your species is strange, the judge said with clear disgust. Yes, Grace agreed pleasantly. We are, and we hope you will come to appreciate our strangeness. Daniel found himself watching Grace more and more as the days passed. He watched how she handled each insult with dignity. He watched how she found small ways to connect with aliens who wanted nothing to do with her. He watched how she never complained, never showed weakness, never let them see her hurt. One night, he found her alone in the observation room of the human ship. She was standing at the window, looking out at the stars, and she did not turn when he entered. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will be another long day. I know. Her voice was tired. I just needed a moment. Daniel walked closer. In the dim light of the stars, he could see that her shoulders were tight with tension. She was holding herself together by pure will alone. How do you do it? He asked. How do you face their hatred every day and still smile? Grace finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. Because I have to, she said simply. Because if I break, they win. Because every time I stand tall despite their cruelty, I prove that they are wrong about me. About us. But does it not hurt? She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she whispered. It hurts very much. But pain is not new to me, Daniel. I have been living with pain since the fire that gave me these scars. I have learned that pain does not have to stop you. It can make you stronger if you let it. Daniel stepped closer still. He wanted to reach out and touch her, to offer some comfort, but he was not sure if it would be welcome. I used to look at your scars and think they were simply marks, he said slowly. Injuries that had healed. But now I see them differently. How do you see them now? As proof of who you are. He met her eyes. The strongest person I have ever known. The most beautiful soul I have ever met. Grace's breath caught. For a moment, her careful control slipped, and he saw the lonely woman beneath the diplomat. The woman who had spent years being stared at, whispered about, judged. Beautiful? She repeated. No one has called me that in a very long time. Then everyone else has been blind. The moment stretched between them, full of something unspoken. Then Grace smiled, and even with the scars pulling at her face, it was the warmest thing Daniel had ever seen. Thank you, she said softly. I needed to hear that tonight. I will tell you again tomorrow, Daniel promised. And every day after, until you believe it. Grace looked at him with something new in her eyes. Something that might have been hope. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance. And somewhere on the council station, the aliens who had treated her so badly slept soundly, not knowing that the woman they called damaged was drawing strength from the very cruelty they showed. Her dad tomorrow would bring new trials, new insults, new tests, but Grace Monroe would face them all, and Daniel Hartley would stand beside her. The crisis came in the final week of negotiations. Daniel had begun to hope that they might actually succeed. Some of the alien species had started to soften toward Grace. The Morvothi ambassador Lumineth had even begun sitting with the humans during meals, her skin glowing brighter each day. A few others had followed her example, but the Cathari had not changed at all. If anything, their hatred had grown stronger. It happened during the final review session. All the council species gathered in the great chamber to discuss humanity's membership. The room was vast, with seats rising in circles around a central stage. High Arbiter Zale sat at the highest point, looking down at everyone with his cold blue skin and dark eyes. Grace stood at the center of the stage, answering the last round of questions. Daniel sat with the human delegation in their assigned section, watching her with pride and worry mixed together. The questions had been going well. Grace handled each one with skill, explaining human values and customs in ways that even the most suspicious aliens could understand. Daniel started to relax. Maybe they would actually make it through. Then Sovereign Yeth of the Kethari stood up. Yeth was the leader of his species delegation. His golden fur was thick and perfectly groomed, and his 4 arms moved in patterns that showed his high status. He had been Grace's harshest critic since the first day, and his face now showed deep satisfaction. "I wish to make a formal motion," Yeth announced. His voice carried across the chamber. High Arbiter Zale looked down at him. "Speak." "I move that humanity's membership be denied until they replace their representative with someone more acceptable." Yeth's eyes fixed on Grace with open disgust. "It is a matter of respect. How can we take seriously a species that parades its broken members before us? It suggests either cruelty or madness." The chamber erupted in whispers. Daniel felt his hands close into fists. Beside him, Lieutenant Brooks made a sound of anger, and Dr. Santos put her hand on his arm to keep him still. On the stage, Grace stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. Zale raised a hand for silence. "This is a serious motion. Would any speak in support?" One by one, Kethari delegates stood to agree with Yeth. Then some of the Valorians joined them, adding their voices to the call for Grace's removal. Even species that had been neutral began to shift, unwilling to stand against the powerful KETH Ari. Daniel watched the support building against them. His stomach felt sick. After all Grace had endured, after all she had sacrificed, they were going to reject humanity because of her face. He started to stand, wanting to say something, wanting to fight back. But Grace caught his eye and gave a tiny shake of her head. "Not yet," the gesture said. "Wait. Would any speak against the motion?" Zale asked. The chamber was quiet. Daniel looked around desperately, hoping someone would stand, someone would defend her. But the aliens who had started to warm to Grace now looked away, afraid to challenge Yeth and his supporters. Then Ambassador Lumineth rose. Her skin blazed with light, brighter than Daniel had ever seen it. Colors danced across her body in patterns that made several nearby aliens gasp. She walked forward slowly, her movements steady despite her age. "I speak against," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. Yeth laughed. "The Morvathi? You have barely spoken to the humans until recently. What can you possibly say in their defense?" Lumineth turned to face him. "I have watched this human," she said. "I have watched her every day since she arrived. I have seen her face insults that would have broken warriors of my own people. I have seen her respond to cruelty with patience, to ignorance with education, to hatred with grace." She paused, her lights still blazing. "I did not understand her at first. Her scars disturbed me, as they disturb all of you. But I asked her about them, and she explained. She told me that among her people, scars are not shame. They are proof of survival. They are stories written on the body. They are badges of honor." The chamber was silent now, listening. "I have thought about her words for many days," Lumineth continued. "And I have come to believe that we have been wrong. Not her, us." She turned to face the full council, her lights changing to colors Daniel had never seen. "We pride ourselves on perfection. We hide our weaknesses. We remove any sign of struggle from our bodies. But what does that make us? It makes us liars. We pretend we have never suffered, never failed, never been hurt." She pointed at Grace with one glowing arm. "This human stands before us with her suffering visible for all to see. She does not hide. She does not pretend. She shows us exactly who she is and asks us to accept her as she truly is. That is not weakness. That is a courage I have rarely seen in any species." Daniel felt his chest swell with emotion. He looked at Grace and saw tears forming in her eyes, though she did not let them fall. But Sovereign Yeth was not moved. "Pretty words," he said dismissively. But they change nothing. The motion stands. This damaged creature is unfit to represent a species before our council. If humanity wishes to join us, they must send someone worthy of the honor. I am worthy, Grace said. Her voice rang out across the chamber, strong and clear. I have earned my place here through decades of work. I have stopped wars. I have saved lives. I have done more good in this galaxy than many who sit in judgment of me today. Your accomplishments do not erase your deformity, Yeth replied coldly. My deformity? Grace stepped forward. You call it deformity. I call it survival. You see ugliness. I see the proof that fire could not destroy me, that pain could not break me, that death itself reached for me and I said no. She turned slowly, looking at all the gathered aliens. You want perfection? Then you want lies. Because no living thing is perfect. Every one of you has scars, whether you show them or not. You hide them with surgery and technology and careful presentation. But they are still there, beneath your perfect surfaces. The chamber was utterly silent. Humanity does not hide, Grace continued. We wear our history on our skin. We let our children see that life can hurt you and you can still stand tall. We teach them that being broken is not the end. It is the beginning of becoming something stronger. She stopped, facing Zale directly. If you reject humanity because of my face, you do not reject me. You reject everything that makes us who we are. And you prove that your council is not ready for species who are brave enough to be honest about what we are. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then High Arbiter Zale leaned forward. His cold face showed something it had not shown before. Not disgust, not contempt, something closer to respect. The motion has been made, he said slowly. It must be voted upon. But I note the arguments on both sides. His dark eyes fixed on Grace. The vote will take place in 3 days. Use that time as you will. The session ended. The aliens filed out, talking among themselves. Daniel pushed through the crowd to reach Grace, who still stood alone on the stage. That was incredible, he said. Grace shook her head. It was not enough. Yeth still has the support. We are going to lose. You do not know that. I know how politics work. She finally let the tears fall, streaking down her scarred cheek. I have fought so hard, Daniel. And it will all be for nothing. Because my face is not pretty enough. Daniel reached out and took her hand. She did not pull away. Then we have 3 days, he said. 3 days to change their minds. And I will spend every moment of those 3 days fighting beside you. Grace looked at him with wet eyes. Why do you care so much? Daniel squeezed her hand. Because somewhere along the way I stopped seeing your scars. I only see you. And you are worth fighting for. Grace stepped closer, leaning her head against his shoulder. He put his arms around her and held her while she cried. 3 days. They had 3 days to save everything. The night before the vote was the longest night of Daniel's life. He found Grace on the observation deck of the Starlight Wanderer, standing at the great window where she had stood so many nights before. The stars stretched out before her, billions of points of light in the endless dark. She did not move when he entered, but he saw her shoulders relax slightly at the sound of his footsteps. You should sleep, he said. Tomorrow will decide everything. I cannot sleep. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. I keep thinking about what will happen if they vote against us. All the work, all the sacrifice, all the hope. Gone because of something as meaningless as scars. Daniel walked to stand beside her. Their reflections showed faintly in the window, overlaid on the stars. It is not meaningless to them, he said. I know. Grace turned to look at him. In the dim starlight, her scars were less visible, but he knew they were there. He had memorized every line, every mark. Their entire understanding of worth is tied to physical perfection. The Cathari literally cannot comprehend why anyone would choose someone like me to speak for their species. They think humans are either stupid or cruel. Then they are fools. They are different. Grace sighed. That is what makes this so hard. I cannot hate them for being what they are. I can only try to show them another way of seeing. She turned back to the window, and they stood in silence for a while. Daniel watched her profile against the stars. The strong line of her jaw, the curve of her nose, the twisted skin that marked the left side of her face. "Grace," he said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you say yes?" "When Earth asked you to be the ambassador, you must have known what would happen. You must have known they would treat you like this. Why did you agree?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with old memories. "Do you know what the assembly told me when they offered me the position? They said that humanity had debated for months about who to send. They could have chosen anyone. Young, beautiful diplomats with perfect faces and perfect bodies. People who would have impressed the aliens with their appearance." She reached up and touched her scarred cheek. "Instead, they chose me, a middle-aged woman with burned scars. And do you know why?" Daniel shook his head. "Because they believed that humanity's worth could never be proven by matching alien standards. If we sent our most perfect specimens, we would be saying that physical beauty matters more than anything else. We would be accepting their definition of value before we even started." She dropped her hand and looked at him directly. "By sending me, humanity made a statement. We said that our best is not defined by appearance. Our best is defined by character, by achievement, by wisdom and courage and strength. If the galaxy cannot accept that, then maybe we do not want to join them after all." Daniel felt something shift in his chest. He had always respected Grace, but in that moment, he understood her in a way he never had before. She was not just a diplomat doing her job. She was a symbol, a statement, a challenge to the entire galaxy. "And if they reject us?" he asked quietly. "Then we go home," Grace said. "And we tell our people that the galaxy was not ready for us. That we tried to show them something beautiful, and they were too blind to see it." She smiled sadly. "But we will have tried. That matters more than winning." Daniel stepped closer to her. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what you said to the council. About scars being proof of survival. About not hiding who you are. Yes? I have scars too." He touched his chest, over his heart. "Not on my skin, but inside. Things I have been through. Losses I have suffered. I have spent years trying to hide them, trying to pretend they do not affect me." Grace watched him with soft eyes. "What changed?" "You." Daniel took another step closer. "Watching you stand up every day and face their hatred. Watching you refuse to be ashamed of what life has done to you. You made me realize that hiding our pain does not make us stronger. It just makes us lonely." He reached out and took her hand. She did not pull away. "Grace, I have been trying to find the right words for days. The right way to tell you what you mean to me. But maybe there are no right words. Maybe I just have to say it simply." He looked into her eyes, one scarred and one smooth, both filled with the same beautiful light. "I love you," he said. "Not despite your scars. Because of everything you are, including the scars. They are part of your story, and your story is the most beautiful one I have ever known." Grace's breath caught. Tears formed in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Daniel," she whispered, "I have spent so many years thinking no one would ever look at me like that again. Thinking the fire took that away from me along with my face. The fire took nothing that mattered." Daniel raised his other hand and gently touched her scarred cheek. "This is not ugliness. This is courage made visible. This is the map of a battle you won. And I would rather look at this face every day for the rest of my life than any perfect one the galaxy could offer. Grace closed her eyes. A tear escaped and ran down her cheek under his hand. Tomorrow they might vote against us, she said softly. Everything might fall apart. Then let it fall apart, Daniel replied. We will still have this. We will still have each other. And we will go home knowing that we showed the galaxy who we really are. Grace opened her eyes. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Hope, love, the light of a woman who had spent too long in darkness finally seeing the sun. She leaned forward and kissed Dot. It was soft at first, gentle as starlight, then deeper, stronger, full of all the things they had been holding back. Daniel pulled her close and felt her arms wrap around him, and for a moment, the vote did not matter. The council did not matter. Nothing existed except the two of them, standing at the edge of forever. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was smiling. A real smile, the kind that made her whole face glow. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, thank you for showing me this, for making me feel beautiful again. Daniel pressed his forehead against hers. You were always beautiful. The galaxy was just too blind to see it. But I see you. I will always see you. They stood together at the window, watching the stars, holding each other in the quiet darkness. Tomorrow would bring the vote. Tomorrow might bring rejection and failure and the end of all their hopes. But tonight they had each other. And sometimes that was enough. Outside, the Galactic Council station turned slowly in space. Somewhere within its massive structure, aliens slept and planned and waited for the morning. Some of them wanted humanity to fail. Some wanted them to succeed. Most did not care either way, but none of them knew what Daniel knew. None of them understood the truth he had learned in the arms of a scorned woman standing before the stars. True beauty was not imperfect skin or flawless features. True beauty was in the courage to be seen as you really are. True beauty was in the scars that proved you had survived. Tomorrow, the galaxy would make its choice, but Daniel had already made his. The council chamber was full when Daniel walked in beside Grace. Every seat was taken. Species from across the galaxy had gathered to witness the vote that would decide humanity's fate. The air was thick with tension and the sounds of a dozen different languages. Daniel held Grace's hand as they made their way to the human section. She squeezed his fingers once, then let go to take her place at the front of the delegation. Her face was calm, showing nothing of the nerves he knew she felt inside. Lieutenant Brooks leaned close to Daniel. I have been talking to people all morning. The count is too close to call. It could go either way. Daniel nodded but said nothing. His eyes were fixed on Grace, watching her stand tall and straight despite everything that had been done to her. High Arbiter Zale took his place at the highest seat. His blue skin gleamed under the chamber lights, and his dark eyes swept across the gathered species before settling on the humans. We are here to vote on the motion brought by Sovereign Yeth of the Kethari, Zale announced. The motion states that humanity's membership be denied until they replace their current representative with someone more acceptable. The chamber was silent. Before we vote, does any species wish to speak? Sovereign Yeth rose immediately. His forearms spread wide in a gesture of command. I have said all that needs to be said. The humans have had their chance to change their representative. They have refused. Let the vote reflect our standards. He sat down with a satisfied expression. Zale looked around the chamber. Any other? For a moment, no one moved. Then Ambassador Lumineth stood up. Her skin was blazing with light, brighter than Daniel had ever seen it. Colors danced across her body in patterns that seemed almost alive. She walked forward slowly, stepping down to the central stage where Grace stood. I wish to speak, Lumineth said. ZA, El nodded. The Morvathi are recognized. Lumineth turned to face the full council. I have lived a very long time, she began. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched empires grow and crumble to dust. And in all that time, I have learned one truth that never changes. She paused, letting her words settle. The measure of a people is not in their appearance. It is in their hearts. The chamber remained silent, listening. I have watched the human ambassador since she arrived. I have seen her endure insults that would have started wars between other species. I have seen her answer cruelty with kindness and hatred with patience. I have seen her stand before this council with her scars visible for all to see, refusing to hide who she is. Lumineth pointed at Grace. This woman has more courage than any 10 of us combined. She walks through a galaxy that finds her horrifying, and she does not flinch. She faces mockery every day, and she responds with dignity. She has been given every reason to hate us, and instead she tries to understand us. Her light shifted to a deep, warm gold. I was wrong about her, Lumineth said. I was wrong about the scars. I thought they meant weakness. I thought they meant damage. But I have learned that among humans, scars mean something different. They mean survival. They mean strength. They mean, I went through fire and I did not break. She turned to look directly at Sovereign Yeth. If we reject humanity because of this woman's face, we prove something terrible about ourselves. We prove that we care more about appearance than character. We prove that we value beauty over courage. We prove that our council is based on lies and fear. Yeth's golden fur bristled with anger, but he did not interrupt. Lumineth faced the council one last time. I call on every species here to look past what you see on the surface. Look at what this woman has done. Look at what she represents. And ask yourself if you want to be part of a galaxy that rejects her. She walked back to her seat. Her lights remained bright, a beacon in the crowded chamber. Zale let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then he raised his hand. The vote will proceed. Each species will register their choice. Against the motion means humanity is accepted. For the motion means humanity is rejected. One by one, the species voted. The Cathari voted for the motion. No surprise there. Daniel watched as several other species joined them. Aliens who had shown nothing but contempt since the humans arrived. But then the Morvathi voted against. And a small species called the Feneth voted against. And the Thran, who had no faces but somehow managed to show disapproval of Yeth's motion. Daniel lost track of the count. The votes came too quickly, and his heart was pounding too hard. He watched Grace standing perfectly still, showing no reaction as each vote was announced. More species voted for. More voted against. The tally grew on both sides, so close that Daniel could not tell who was winning. Finally, only one vote remained. The VELORINS. High Arbiter Zale leaned forward. His face was impossible to read. The entire chamber held its breath. The Valorian Collective, Zale said slowly, has watched these proceedings with great interest. We have seen arguments on both sides. We have seen passion and principle displayed by many speakers. He paused. But in the end, we are forced to ask ourselves a simple question. What kind of galaxy do we want to live in? One where appearance determines worth, or one where a person is judged by their actions? His dark eyes found Grace. Ambassador Monroe has shown us something we did not expect to see. She has shown us that strength can come in many forms. That beauty is not always visible to the eye. That courage can be found in the willingness to stand alone against hatred. Zale straightened in his seat. The Valorian Collective votes against the motion. The chamber exploded into noise. Daniel grabbed Lieutenant Brooks in a hug, laughing and crying at the same time. Dr. Santos was weeping openly. Around them, humans were shouting with joy. The final count was narrow but clear. Humanity had been accepted into the Galactic Council. Daniel pushed through the crowd to reach Grace. She was still standing on the stage, tears streaming down her face as aliens she had never expected to befriend came to offer congratulations. Lumineth reached her first, and the old Morvathi wrapped her glowing arms around the human woman in an embrace that blazed with light. When Daniel finally got to her side, Grace turned and fell into his arms. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it. You did it." He held her tight. "You showed them who we are." The celebrations continued for hours. Species that had barely spoken to the humans now approached with gifts and words of welcome. Even some of the Valorians came to offer their respect, though they kept their distance from Yeth and the other Cathori who had voted against Thoth as the crowd finally began to thin. Daniel found a quiet moment with Grace on the observation deck of the station. The stars shone through the great windows, the same stars they had watched together so many times before. "You know," he said softly, "they called you damaged. They called you broken. They said you should never have been sent." Grace nodded, waiting. "But I watched you," Daniel continued. "I watched you turn hatred into curiosity. I watched you turn disgust into respect. You did not change yourself to meet their standards. You showed them that their standards were too small." He reached up to touch her scarred cheek, gentle as starlight. "They feared your face," he said. "But I call you the universe's most beautiful queen. And I think the galaxy is finally starting to understand why." Grace leaned into his touch. Her eyes were wet with happy tears. "I spent so long thinking my scars made me less than other people," she said. "That the fire took something from me that I could never get back. But maybe it gave me something instead. Maybe it gave me the chance to show the galaxy what real strength looks like." Daniel kissed her softly. "It gave you to me. That is what matters most." They stood together at the window, watching the stars. Somewhere on the station, the Galactic Council was preparing to welcome humanity into their ranks. Ships would carry the news back to Earth. Billions of people would celebrate. But the true victory was not in the vote. It was in the message that votes sent across the galaxy. Humanity had come to the stars, not as perfect beings pretending to be flawless. They had come as they truly were, with their scars and their struggles and their stubborn refusal to hide. And the galaxy had accepted them. Grace Monroe turned in Daniel's arms and smiled up at him. Her scarred face caught the starlight, and he thought she had never looked more beautiful. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "I am already home. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Grace kissed him again, and the universe seemed to hold its breath around them. A new chapter was beginning. For humanity, for the galaxy. And for a woman with a scarred face who had shown them all that true beauty comes from within. The end.